Well, hey everybody. We have made it past the Belgian Grand Prix at a very wet Spa-Francorchamps racetrack, and now we're looking forward to the Hungarian Grand Prix, which is hosted at its traditional location, which is called the Hungaroring. So just thought I'd share with you a little bit of the history of this track, a little bit of information about maybe what to kind of expect for this race, and hopefully this will help add to your enjoyment when you sit down and watch the race this weekend. The Hungaroring is a really interesting track in that it holds the distinction of being the first venue that was built for a Grand Prix race that was built behind the former Iron Curtain. At the time when the Hungaroring was built, Hungary itself was still a communist country and was part of the Soviet bloc. And so it was very an interesting move by Bernie Ecclestone to bring that race to Hungary, which has had actually a pretty decent history of having a lot of motor racing enthusiasts. And what's pretty cool about this track is that the first Hungarian Grand Prix was held in 1986 at the Hungaroring, and they've had a race ever since. And the attendance has always been really good. Lots of fans come to this race, and of course, Hungary is now back to being its own nation. It's not a part of the Soviet bloc anymore, of course, but yeah, it's become a great venue. Now the drivers maybe will say, hey, the ambiance is great. The track, maybe not so great. It has in the past been criticized for being overly tight and twisty, even though the track has undergone several modifications since its original design. And it's all been aimed basically to take care of overtaking. There were some S-turns behind the pits at one time, but they were there basically to deal with an underwater spring that was playing havoc, with the undercoat of the paving and the stabilization of the surface. But they eventually got that taken care of, and those S's have been redone. They don't exist anymore. There's also been several reprofiling of corners to improve. For example, the last few corners were reprofiled to improve the run onto the main straight, with then turn one at the end of the main straight being tightened up to allow for better overtaking opportunities. But generally speaking, the track hasn't changed too much. It was recently repaved, and that has certainly helped the racing as well. There actually was a Budapest Grand Prix held only one time in 1936 at a park near Budapest, and that race was won by Tazio Nuvolari in an Alfa Romeo. But that was really the only, Grand Prix that was held at the track until 1986. Part of that was, of course, there was this thing called World War II that interrupted a lot of it. And then when Hungary became a part of the Soviet bloc after World War II, there was some local racing, but really nothing to the scale of a modern Formula One race. But that all changed in 1985 when a group of enthusiasts decided that they were going to construct this circuit, which is I believe it's about 12 miles outside of Budapest. And at the time, it was still part of the communist bloc. So it was pretty amazing that they were able to get permission to do it, that they were able to raise the money. And of course, they had support from Bernie Ecclestone, who was running Formula One at the time. And they were able to make it happen. And apparently the driving force behind all of this was a desire to promote tourism in Hungary. So really, really interesting. And of course, by that time, that was 1985 when it was starting. And of course, the Soviet Union was starting to show some cracks. And of course, it eventually collapsed in the late 1980s, early 1990s. The other thing that I think is really interesting about this track is that it's hard to believe it today, given the long lead times it takes to build a circuit and all of those things. But this track, from start to finish, took 8 months, which is incredible. So anyway, the first Grand Prix was won by Nelson Piquet in front of an astonishing 200,000 fans. Remember, at this time, with the Iron Curtain being what it was, travel from the West into countries that were part of the Soviet bloc, in other words, going through the Iron Curtain, it was difficult. Getting in, getting out, not easy. And yet 200,000 fans showed up. And I know a lot of them were Hungarians, but money was pretty tight back in those days, and so to be able to afford to pay for a ticket if you were a Hungarian fan, man, it says a lot about your passion for the sport. Anyway, the event was undoubtedly a success, even if the track was less enthusiastically received by the drivers. Not only is it tight and twisty, but at the time, the surface itself was very, very slippery. Some of that had to do with the type of asphalt that was laid, but also there was just a lack of general use. I mean, they would race there for Formula One, but in between Formula One weekend and the next race for Formula One the year afterwards, there was very little activity. So the track would be very dusty, rubber would not be laid down, that sort of thing. So the track was very slick. Some drivers enjoyed driving the course, but others just detested it. But all of them agreed that overtaking was at a premium. And so, again, there was reprofiling of corners in an effort to improve overtaking attempts. Certainly Nigel Mansell proved that it could be done when he passed, I don't know, it was like 11 or 12 cars to win the Grand Prix years ago. And since then, the track has produced much better racing. But it's still, it's not as tough to pass as, say, Monaco or Imola, but it's still pretty tough. The track itself is 2.7 miles long, so it's relatively short. It has 14 turns. And depending on the car, the setup's going to require either a high downforce setup or a medium high downforce setup if you want to gamble a little bit and see if you can get some high, get an advantage going down that long straightaway, because honestly, that's about the only place that you can pass. I'm guessing that for ultimate lap time, and this is a guess, you probably want a high downforce setup. However, if you want to make it really difficult for somebody to get around you, or if you want a shot at getting past somebody, having maybe a little bit less downforce but greater straight line speed might be enough to, A, keep somebody behind you in the race, or allow you in DRS to go past somebody. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the teams arrive at. Also, this track is pretty hard on the brakes, and so you'll probably see teams coming in with circuit-specific updates for the cars. Again, I think with 2026 coming up, the new regulations, new cars being built, I think about the only new developments that you're going to see are probably around circuits specific. And so better brake cooling is probably going to be one of them, which they could then wind up using in Mexico City most probably, because there you've got high altitude and temperature, so you need more air on the brakes to cool them, and maybe better engine cooling. So anyway, it should be an interesting race, and we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. Thanks for listening, and we'll be providing our race notes and end of the month notes sometime next week, and so stay tuned for that.